I'm joined now by Jeff Duncan, columnist for the Times-Picayune, of course, and NOLA.com. And listen, last week the Saints beat themselves against the Washington Redskins, but today don't you have to just tip your cap a little bit to Carolina? They outplayed the Saints.
I thought so, Fred, and I thought it was a very difficult spot for the Saints to go in and play Carolina coming off a bad performance themselves down in Tampa, and you get them in their home opener, you know they're going to be fired up. And I thought the Saints opened the game well. I mean, with a nice 80-yard drive, kind of take the crowd out of the game. But that pick six at the beginning that Drew Brees threw, I think really kind of got the life back in the crowd. And it was like an uphill battle after that.
And speaking of battle, Drew Brees was like battling all day long. He was only sacked once, which amazed me. But he was constantly being harassed. This was not a clean game for him. He was on the deck a lot.
Yeah, very misleading stat, the sack total. Carolina, a lot like Washington did, was able to throw off the timing of the passing game. And really, if you talk to defensive coordinators in the league, that's really what you're searching for out of your defensive front. You're not always going to get to the quarterback, but if you can disrupt the timing, move him off his spot, and they did that a lot today. He seemed to be scrambling around, and that's just not the Drew Brees that we know. And he's had a rough start so far, and now he's putting up a lot of yards, but he's not efficient like we're used to seeing.
Now, on the defensive side of the ball, one of the most glaring things to me is they could not stop Carolina from running. They had 10 yards last week against Tampa Bay. They had 135 in the first half today.
Yeah, and Carolina is a much better running team than they showed last week. That offensive line they have is known as one of the best rushing attacks in the league. They're really good run blockers, and you could tell Ron Rivera got after them this week, and that was a point of emphasis for them. And the Saints have got to stop the run better. They brought in Broderick Bunkley, they brought in Curtis Loft and David Hawthorne. These guys were brought in to upgrade that run defense. So far, we haven't seen it. Now, I know it's going to take time. People are going to have to be patient with Steve Spagnuolo's new scheme. Everybody you talk to that's played in it says it takes a while to kind of master, but the Saints don't have time on their side right now. The NFL is not waiting on them.
No, 0-2, that's not the way you want to start, certainly. Statistically, when you take a look at the numbers, the Saints did pretty well today. Won in a lot of different categories. Would you think that the biggest difference was the big play? Carolina had it when they needed it, Saints did.
Yeah, sure, Fred, and that is what we're used to seeing the Saints do. They're one of the leaders in the last few years in big plays on offense, and they're giving them up on defense. Now, we're used to that. We're also used to seeing the Saints put up way more than the opponent. And right now, I think defenses have kind of got a beat on the Saints. How many times did we see Drew Brees throw the ball into the dirt on the screen pass? These teams, I think, are starting to get a beat on that offense a little bit, have them really well scouted, and the Saints are going to have to adjust, and I think that's where we're seeing them miss Sean Payton, a guy that always seemed to be a step ahead of the defense. Right now, it seems like the defense are ahead of the Saints offense.
Well, Drew's just running for his life back there. I mean, we were both talking about it. I was awfully afraid he had torn an ACL when he was taken down on that one particular play back there.
Yeah, a very nasty hit, and he's taken some big hits here in the first two games. The Saints' protection partly is handicapped by the fact of the score. They're having to play a lot of catch-up, but he's taken some big hits, and at some point, I don't know if he's going to be as fortunate as he was to come out of that one.
Pierre Thomas, 110 yards today. First time he's gone over 100, I think, since 2007. Are you expecting to see a lot more of him as the season wears on?
Well, I don't know. I think they're going to stick with that by committee operation in the backfield. I think they want to preserve those guys' health. He took some big hits today, so did Mark Ingram. It was a very physical game. Carolina always is. But he, I thought, carried the team and really kind of brought them back into the picture there late when it seemed all hope was lost. He's got a slippery way of running. It's amazing. He's not that fast, not that big, not that strong, but he just manages to make people miss. And I thought he kind of breathed some life back into the Saints offense. But we've been seeing him do that for a few years, but I think they want to still kind of give him a pitch count a little bit. They drafted Mark Ingram for a reason, and they've got Darren Sproles as well. So I would be surprised if he plays any more than he's playing right now.
And no question about it, Cam Newton is a very special player. We're just talking about the fact that when you watch him walk into the huddle, he's as big as anybody else that's in there.
Yeah, and for a guy to move that way, Fred, with that agility, we saw him run the ball. He had 71 yards rushing. That's what the Saints have really struggled with these first 2 weeks with RG3 and Cam Newton, the running quarterbacks. They're not going to face that every week. So that is a challenge that they're probably going to be able to get away from. But this past Sunday in this game, I thought he was the difference in the game. Clearly, his running, he's such a big target. He's such a guy who can break tackles, and he's very agile for a 6'6" guy, very fast. We saw him on that long run. He's a guy that I think is going to be an MVP candidate here in the next year or two.
Now, of course, these guys are grown men, they're professionals, the whole thing, but how important is it for Coach Cromer and the rest of the coaches to get these guys focused on a Kansas City team that's not good, but to not look past them thinking about Green Bay in week 4?
Yeah, well, let's face it, they've got to get a win. I mean, they're 0-2 now. We've all seen the statistics. The Saints have never had a winning season after they started 0-2, and only 13% of the teams that start 0-2 ended up making the playoffs. Now, not all those teams have a guy like Drew Brees and an offense like the Saints, so that's the optimism that you can have if you're a Saints fan. But this game at home, in Kansas City coming off a miserable performance against Buffalo, they're going to be wanting to get back on track. The Saints can't look ahead to that Green Bay game because that's going to be difficult in itself, and you'd much rather be staring at 1-3 if that's your fate as opposed to 0-4.
Could be a trap game, which is awfully hard to say when you're 0-2, but you never can tell. Jeff, thank you so much for coming by. We always appreciate your insights.
Yeah, my pleasure, Fred.
All right, Jeff Duncan, TimesPicayune, NOLA.com.